Hi, hola, welcome to the
Hola.
2022 Latinx Kid Like Book Festival. Today we will be celebrating the art of storytelling through comics and graphic novels. I'm Juliet Menendez, and I am so happy to be here with you today. I'm the author and illustrator of Latinitas, celebrating 40 Big Dreamers, which is also available in Spanish as Latinitas, una celebración de 40 soñadoras audaces, and also has come out in a board book format for the littlest ones in your life, a bilingual board book. Latinitas is a feminist history that starts off in the 1600s, celebrating writer and philosopher Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, and ends with present day figures like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and gymnast Lori Hernandez. If you like learning about inspiring women, their childhoods, the things they loved when they were little, and the life changing moments that helped them become the women we celebrate today, you should check it out. So, today I have the honor and pleasure of being here with Jared Rosello, Carlos Gonzalez, Rodrigo Vargas, and Connie Giovannini's. And before we get started, I just want to make sure that those of you joining us today are aware of our anti-harassment policy. Please check the chat box so we make sure this is a safe place for everyone. So, getting to the fun part, could each of you introduce yourselves and your books, please? Let's start with you, Jared Rosello.
Hey everybody, I'm Jared Rosello. I'm a Cuban-American cartoonist and writer. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and now I live in Tampa, Florida, and I teach creative writing at University of South Florida. And I'm a graphic novelist. And so I'm the author of Red Panda and Moon Bear, the middle grade graphic novel series about these two Cuban-American siblings who have magical hoodies that they use to fight monsters and solve mysteries in their neighborhood. Um, and book two just came out last April, and they have two sidekick dogs that are these shape-shifting monsters from another planet who helps them whenever there's like a really big monster that they need to beat.
So fun! I love that. I love these magical hoodies. And Carlos, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hola, I'm Carlos Gonzalez, and my book, which is Carlos Gomez Freestyles, heavy on the style, is semi-autobiographical depiction of my childhood. Um, I grew up in South Dakota, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and we were pretty much the only Latino family there, uh, give or take one or two others. But and it's very semi-autobiographical. I was a lot more shy than my character is. He's probably going to be gay. He is gay. And he's very drawn to his sister's room, all the things in it. Um, he ends up befriending this young girl who's a BMXer, and she gets him into this competition. The thing is, he doesn't know how to ride a bike, and his bike is his sister's old Barbie bike, and his his siblings all help out in their way when they're not sick of him and wanting him out of the room. His brother kind of pimps out the bike, and it looks kind of great. And he does eventually learn how to ride the bike. That's a big part of the story. Um, anyway, that's I grew up in South Dakota, but I left and ended up in New York, and now I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, and also part time in Brooklyn. Um, so that's that.
Oh, I loved it so much, and I'm so excited for readers to get to know it. Let's go to the two of you, Rodrigo and Connie. Can you introduce yourselves a little bit and talk about the books that you've been working on?
Hi, hola. My name is Rodrigo Vargas, and
I'm Connie Giovannini's.
and we both worked on this graphic novel that's coming out next year. It's called The Do Over, and it's about Mariana, this little girl that is new in town and has to make friends and has a lot of trouble with that. And once she does find a group that she fits in, they start a little business together
Yeah.
with doing crazy haircuts. It has a lot of fun times, and there's a lot of social interaction between these characters, and sometimes the stuff doesn't always go right, and they have to find a way to make it all work for the big harvest fest that's at the end. It all works out okay, but it's fun. It's a fun read.
Yeah, there's a lot of lots of adventures, lots of funny moments.
Yeah, we try to make it very funny.
Yeah.
It,
Also,
it,
we're from Chile. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
think we
we're
mentioned
from
it.
Chile.
Yeah, we
That's
live in Santiago, Chile,
uh,
all the way
down south.
down south.
Oh, well, your book definitely was fun. And I think for all the little entrepreneurs out there, it will also be very inspiring. And also for all the kids figuring out how to adapt to being in a new school and all of that, too. So we also have Kat Fajardo joining us today. And Kat, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Kat Fajardo. I'm a cartoonist. I do illustrations and comics and book covers for middle grade readers. I'm also the artist and illustrator of, the artist and writer of Miss Quinces, or Señorita Quinces in Espanol, which is published by Scholastic Graphics. And I'm so excited for people to read that because it's based on my own experience as a reluctant quinceañera. Um, a little bit about the book. It's about a young girl named Sue who would rather do anything else than celebrate her own quinceañera. All she wants to do for summer vacation is read and make comics over sleepaway camp, which is what I wanted to do as a kid as well. And things are okay during her vacation. She spends times with her family who live out in the middle of nowhere in the countryside, and things turn for the worst when her mom suddenly announces that they're going to throw her a surprise quinceanera, which is the very last thing she wants. Um, and so she and her mom strike a deal. Sue would continue doing her quinceanera preparations in exchange that her mom would let her go to sleepaway camp, which is actually what she wants to do that summer. But dealing with a large Latina family can be quite chaotic, and so whether or not she's gonna hold her end of the bargain, yeah, it's a wild ride. But yeah, it's a sweet coming of age story about navigating the expectations of family, of cultural traditions, and just finding yourself in all of that, especially finding yourself in two worlds. And so that's something I experienced myself. So yeah, I'm so excited for people to read it.
Yes, I loved it so much, and I definitely relate to that experience of finding yourself between two worlds, and also the longing for summer camps, which I also never experienced. So, but yeah, I love all of your books so much, and yeah, so I think for a lot of people listening today who might be aspiring graphic novelists themselves or are very into comics, I would love them. I would love you to share some of your favorite comics growing up and how they helped you navigate your own experiences and form your own sense of identity. Um, so I know that's a big question in some ways, but I always have a hard time picking out my favorites. But yeah, just to give a little sense of what your background is. So, Carlos, can we start with you for this one?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a bit older than probably all of you, so I grew up in the golden era of getting up on Saturday morning and starting off with um, Warner Brothers and Scooby Doo and Pink Panther and Crazy Cat. And I was the Crazy Cat was one that really influenced me. Uh, Originally it dated back to like the 1920s, but I just was obsessed with it, with the original version of it, which was really surreal, and it took place in a lot of the backgrounds were looked like the moon. It was supposed to depict New Mexico, and it was this cat that was in love with the dog, and a mouse, or his cat was in love with this mouse. It was fairly abusive to him. but I loved the Archies. As I got older, I loved, Mad Magazine, um, Love and Rockets. When I got a little old, anyway, I think that sums it up. Um, and also whatever was in the newspaper, all the syndicateds. I loved King of It. I loved Charlie Brown. I feel like Carlos is a brown Charlie Brown, basically. That's, it's the same big head. And yeah, I think that sums it up.
Yeah, and did you identify a lot with that? I'm guessing if
Yeah, kind of. I was always felt sorry for myself, and seemed like I was an odd man in, that didn't quite fit in, and as Kat said, I was living in two worlds. It's like at home we're a Mexican American family, but you leave the house and it was blindingly white, pretty much, and so I took a lot of comfort in comics. And my sister set up a library of comics, and my parents said we could stay up as long as we were reading and comics counted. So we had an extensive library of it.
I love that rule too. I think that's the best. You can stay up as long as you're reading.
Yeah.
So let's see. Kat, what about you? What inspired you when you were growing up in terms of comics and graphic novels?
Yeah, so what inspired me, I would say a combination of, just like Carlos, like Archie comics. My older sister had a bunch of digest comics that she passed down to me, kind of like, some kind of family heirloom. And so that was my introduction to American comics for the first time as a young kid. And then later on, I discovered manga, which was like mind blowing for me at the time because, during the 90s, it was just one small shelf on Barnes and Noble, but now it's just like a whole, like basically like a whole store. So yeah, that really influenced me as a kid, and then that kind of jumpstart my love into anime and all that, and so to the point where I started creating my own characters or like fanfics of these series, and so that's when I started making comics, which was really fun. And then I always wanted to. I knew I always wanted to be like an artist at a young age, but I didn't know what exactly. I was really into like fine arts, and so this introduction to comics really kind of piqued my interest in that world and of just making comics as a cartoonist. And then it wasn't until high school where I, wanted, I was trying to figure out what kind of like college I wanted to go to because I knew I wanted to go to an art college, but I didn't know what exactly and for what. And it wasn't until senior year I went to a Barnes and Noble, and I like kind of stumbled my way into the graphic novel section, and then I saw a book called The Education of Hopi Glass by Jaime Hernandez. And I'm just like, wait, this kind of looks familiar. This looks like Archie comics, but also not at the same time. And I was like blown away. I was obsessed because it was like the first time I've seen people who looked, characters that looked like me, who looked like, people I grew up with, people I knew. And so I was just like, Latina punks and, queer Latina punks. Because at the time, I'm just like, I didn't know I was queer. So I'm just like, this is scandalous. This is awesome. Like, what is this? And so that kind of jumpstart my, my interest into making graphic novels. I was just like, I want to make this. How do I make this? And so that's why I went to the School of Visual Arts for cartooning. And that's kind of the jumpstart into, like, my career. So yeah, Jaime Hernandez's work is like super awesome, and I love his work so much.
Oh my goodness, literally goosebumps hearing you talk about it and just that journey from figuring out what kind of artist I want to be. I mean, not me, like just like from you figuring that out. And yeah, I love those comics too. So thank you so much for sharing. What a beautiful story. And Jared, what about you? What inspired you?
Yeah, I didn't read a lot of comics when I was a kid. Okay, you're lucky today because you can go to like a bookstore and there's like a whole section of graphic novels, or you can go to your library and there's a whole section. But when I was a kid, it was really hard to get comics. You had to go like all the way to like that one comic book store, and they were kind of expensive. I guess they still kind of are kind of expensive to buy comic books. And so, but my grandparents got the newspaper, and so I would read the comics in the newspaper, and my favorite was Calvin and Hobbes. And I probably overly identified with Calvin and Hobbes, but if you know this comic, I think he's six in the comic, and he has a stuffed animal tiger, and he imagines that he's real, and they go on adventures, and they just get in trouble all the time. And I was always getting in trouble all the time, so I definitely identified with Calvin, and I loved that he had this big imagination, and I loved that like the grown-ups around him didn't quite get it because I felt like that was the thing that always got me in trouble was being too imaginative or too playful. So having Calvin and Hobbes made me feel like, okay, there's at least one other kid in the world who's getting in trouble for being too imaginative like me. But I loved animation and I loved cartoons. And so I was always watching cartoons and always trying to draw cartoon characters. And I feel like I took my love of cartoons and I took Calvin and Hobbes and I loved stories and just playing with action figures and making my own stories. And comics is really cool because you can take anything that you love in the world and you can put it into your comic. And so I took making up stories with my brother in the backyard with our action figures, reading Calvin and Hobbes, watching cartoons, and eventually I just stuck all those things together and started making comics.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's so important for kids to know too, if you're listening, that keep playing with your action figures, dolls, whatever. That's where the stories are born. And it's such an important part of creating those stories in your mind and drawing things too. So I love that you shared that. And so, Rodrigo and Connie, can you talk a little bit? I know you're both together, so I don't know. Maybe Connie, like maybe you start this time and talk.
Sure.
I
You want to go ahead?
Sure, I can start this time. So yeah, just like Jared, I didn't read that many comics as a kid, I think. I did read Tintin because my dad liked it and like showed it to me, which it's still one of my favorite comics. But I also watch a lot of cartoons, and I don't know, I watched Dexter's Lab, then Foster's Home. I was obsessed with Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends as a kid. And then I found out about manga, Cardcaptor, Asumanga Dayo, and I was like obsessed with the style, and I would draw my own characters. And I think what finally pushed me to make my own comics, like I was making my characters and drawing stuff, but I think it wasn't until I found webcomics on the internet, just like seeing that anyone could just make a comic and share it. And I was like, oh, I can make comics too. Like it hadn't crossed my mind before that the comics are read. I can actually draw my own. So then I would like make my own comics and share them with my friends. I started making some comics and like sharing them in class. So I think that's how I got mostly into it, like manga and then web comics, and then I
Yeah.
didn't stop. And here I am now.
Yeah, in my way, it was. I mean, I'm a bit older too, but yeah, back then in Chile, we didn't really have that many comic book places to you can just go and pick up a Spider-Man and stuff like that. I would love to read Spider-Man, and I would read like the X-Men and stuff like that. But you will buy one book a year probably, and you get it for Christmas, and that was your present. and and I love them, but yeah, like probably the thing that got me more into it was when I found manga, and I would read Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon and whatever will like find their way into me.
Yeah.
Then it's just cartoons. I guess I didn't really read that many comics as a kid because they weren't available. But I did make a lot of comics as a kid, and I've always been more like like I want to do the stuff that I like. So when I discovered music, I wanted to be a musician. When I discovered comics, I wanted to make my own comics, and that's what actually got me into like where I am right now. I used to have this little character called El Astutito, which means like the little smart guy, and he will like bust criminals, and he will disguise himself as a cloud, so nobody will find him ever because he was just a cloud in the sky. That was my
That
favorite.
is so
So cute. So cute. Oh, I love hearing how people started out, and I think it's so fun to know kind of the which comics inspired you, and now your comics are inspiring a different generation, and I love that continuity. So these are definitely more for your artistic background. So I'd love to know how you developed your own drawing style. So from all of these influences that you had, how did you come to figure out your own style for comics? I know some of you hit on this a little bit, but like who inspired you? I mean, you just mentioned different comics. Were they the ones that inspired you, or who inspired you, and how did you craft your own look for your unique comics that you have now? And I think, Kat, let's start with you.
That's a really good question. Because I want to say like manga, just like reading a lot of manga and just like kind of like creating my own character based on the series. But I've been told different things. I've been told that my work looks more like, I don't know, like Steven Universe or like all these other things that also been influenced by manga as well. So like it's very tricky. But I would say what definitely, yeah, started me like to draw in that similar style. Yeah, it's like Sailor Moon, any of the Clamp series. Um, that's a really hard question. But I think eventually, over time, once I got into like Jaime's work, I wanted to create more clean, like cleaner lines and have a similar style to his. And so I experimented a lot with like different types of traditional media. So like I tried to do like brush work using like a brush and ink, or like nibs. Even though I'm terrible at using nibs because I just kind of blot ink everywhere. But yeah, I think it's a combination of just like what I was like influenced by at the moment, and then just like trying out different techniques. But I think it's just a combination of everything that I've loved growing up into the style I developed today. Because even today, my style keeps changing as well. It's just like an organism of its own, just constantly just evolving. So like, yeah. So I want to say manga definitely influenced my style today.
Well, I love that you included the part about experimenting because I think a lot of people think you just kind of born with your own style or something like that. And I think so much of it is trying out different materials. Yeah, you have influences, but seeing what works for you and just doing it again and again and again and seeing what kind of clicks and what feels like you a little bit. So thank you. And let's see, Jared, could you tell us a little bit about what that process was like for you?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I used to love to draw, but there were two other kids in my class who were the better drawers. So eventually I was like, okay, I can't be the drawer kid anymore. So I'll go like learn, I'll go practice writing or other things. I started playing music, but I still loved drawing, so I was just always doing it. And one of the things I learned, I guess, was so I didn't pursue art as like a in school or take any classes or anything like that. But one of the things I learned was that you have all the styles, all the influences that you love, all of like the cartoons you watch, the books that you read, all those things that you love. But you also have your hands that you have to pay attention to. I think that your hands like to make certain lines, and so sometimes you should work with the kinds of lines that you like to make and just like get a sketchbook and doodle and see what are those lines that you like making, because I think if you want to make comics you have to love the drawing part of it, and learning to love the drawing part of it is enjoying the drawing experience. So there were definitely stories when I started out that I wanted to tell, but it wasn't in my art style, and so it was frustrating for me. And when I found that I could tell stories that matched my art style, my cartooning just kind of exploded, and I sort of found my style. It partly inside of me, partly in my brain, partly in my hands, partly in the stuff that I loved. So
That's a beautiful way to describe it, that you love making. What kind of lines do you love? I never thought about it in that way. I really love how you said that. And Rodrigo and Kani, could you tell us a little bit? Rodrigo, I'll start with you this time.
Sure. Well, I don't know. I used to draw a lot of comics, but I never really like paid much attention to the drawing part of it. I was just just creating whatever was on my mind. And but then I dropped drawing at all, like as a kid. And then I grew up as a teenager and I got into music and I did whatever. But then I rediscovered making comics as a teenager. And I mean, I was like 17, 18. And that's when I actually started to draw again and started to learn how to draw and do it all. And by then I was already like, there was so many comics that I had read by then that I just wanted to put everything that I saw on them on my own stuff, on my own drawings. So I love Spider-Man, so I wanted to draw Spider-Man. I wanted to be good at drawing Spider-Man. Until today, I'm very bad at drawing Spider-Man. It's a really hard, like, there's a lot of
He's
lines.
hard.
It is very hard, right? But then I don't know, like, just as Kat did, I discovered Los Bros Hernandez, and I discovered, like, probably who's my favorite cartoonist, Evan Dorkin from New York, and I discovered David Mazzucchelli, and just a couple years later, he released like a series polyp, and I was like, oh my god, you can do all this in comics, and I was amazed. And right now, I just try to make everything that I like. I try to put a little bit on it, and if I like something new tomorrow, I'm gonna probably try to put that too. Like right now, it's European comic artists. What
Yeah.
about you?
Well, it's like Kat said. Like there's we think about this like having a drawing style, but it's actually something that evolves over time, and it's always changing because we're always finding out about new things that we like, and we start like adding a little bit of that and then this and that into it. So it's always changing. I feel that when I first started drawing, no, when I first started drawing, like as a little kid, it was mostly Pokemon, and I would just like make my own creatures, and I had like at least I had like 100 different of my own Pokemon. Then as I got into manga, I was influenced by that style, like little chibi, like with the big eyes and everything. So I was into that. Then I started getting more into cartoons. When Foster's Home came out, I started seeing my style switching to something more cartoony. So it's like a lot of different influences over time. The Professor Layton games also played a part because the character design in those games is like
So good.
absolutely amazing. So I got a little bit of that too. And as I grow up, even now that I'm like, I have my style, people recognize it, but I'm always adding new things. I'm always finding out about new stuff. And it's like, ooh, I could like add a little bit of these, add a little bit of that. What else? Well, comics like Yukota from Johnny Wonder, Lucy Nicely, Meredith Grant, all those styles that I really, really like. Like, ooh, these lines. Oh, this way of drawing hands. I don't know. It's a mix of everything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I love that you mentioned such a wide variety because I think people don't realize sometimes there's so many influences that go into it. And of course, yeah, every artist, the fun of it is experimenting, adding new things and figuring out, what works for each project, but also like your own style just evolving. So I love the way both of you describe that. And Carlos, please tell us about your process.
Unmute. Okay. My process. Uh, my Carlos Gomez took a number of years for me to come up with. I originally did it for an adult audience in a friend's gay entertainment zine in the 90s. And originally, Carlos looked like a middle-aged, looked like me with no hair and a big nose. And he evolved over time. And one of the things, all the characters, I kind of just realized are all based on, Marie, the sister, is Veronica on the Archies, and the style of her. She has a little turned up nose, and her hair is always changing. And my actual sister's name was Antoinette, so it's Marie Antoinette. And she was quite fashionable, still is. And so she's part of my background is I've been an illustrator for a number of years, and I did a lot of middle grade books, and a lot of the books that I did were for young girls, and I did like columns in Tiger Beat and Cosmo Girl and um, 17, and so that I kind of the style sort of developed over time, um, because I just kept wanting to evolve it. But I do think that Carlos Gomez it was a leap. It's all very um, line art, cartoony with color. The next book that I'm working on, I want to get a little bit more painterly and kind of go for it and have some larger spreads and stuff like that. But I definitely realized that every character kind of had a cartoon history. I don't, the two old ladies across the street, they're straight out of Mad Magazine. Don Martin, their noses look like cucumbers. Their eyes are googly, and literally, other than Marie, none of them really looked the way they look. I mean, I did kind of look like that. I definitely had a big nose, and my hair was stiff, and my brother is the brother Juan is straight out of the syndicated cartoons like Doctor Id, the Wizard of Id. He's just a smart aleck and kind of a sage, and they really sort of drew themselves. I had the toughest part drawing the parents. They both definitely look like my parents, but as I said before, this is very semi autobiographical. It's a lot of fiction with truth thrown in spots. And so in a lot of ways, they like I said, they kind of drew themselves, but it's after a history of of looking at cartoons and being very influenced by them.
I love all those connections to each characters. That's so fascinating to think about it in that way. And you described that so beautifully. And you have such a particular sense of how to capture people's expressions. And I love knowing that connection that you have. So thank you.
That's a definite Charles M. Schulz. He tried to keep his characters to like 5 lines, their face. And within those 5 lines, you've got to capture every emotion. Mm-hmm. So it's shoot for subtlety, and it's just like you've got these 5 puzzle pieces, and you can just move them around, and that works. I have trouble doing like the backs of their heads, or when they get in profile, because I drew them first head on and 3/4 mostly. And it gets kind of complex. I mean, I really just need to come up with a model of each one, 360, so I know what they look like. So yeah, it's been a learning process, and I'm on book number 2, so I'm really trying to like look back at the first book and see what I did that didn't quite come up the way I wanted it to, and a lot of times it's seeing the other angles. And making these characters 3-dimensional and not just so you can only look at them straight on or 3/4.
Well, that is always tricky, especially with very simplified characters, for sure. And I love the idea of like the different lines being puzzle pieces that you move around as needed. That's a very great way to think about it. So yeah. I would love to talk to you now about a little bit about the core of your book, which I noticed for Kat and you, Carlos, that each of you included a very strong sibling bond in your stories. And I think that's so important. And I would love to know how you feel that siblings help us shape and understand our sense of identity, because it seemed like a very important part of your stories. So Kat, can we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sue's relationship with her sisters are actually no surprise based on my own relationship. I'm the middle child of 2 sisters, and so it's been an interesting relationship through our lives. The older sister is the one that usually navigates through those 2 worlds. So I hate to describe it, but they're kind of like the canary in the mines, just like, okay, like go out to the world. I want to see what I can be as an adult, what I can be allowed to do, because in Latina households, it's the rules are much more stricter on the daughters than it is for the sons, from my experience. And so, just seeing what my sister is capable of doing, and as an adult, later on, we kind of bonded over that. Just bonding over the fact that, like, our parents were strict on us, and we were able to break through that mold, and just like navigate through life and assimilation, and kind of find ourselves within those two cultures. So it was kind of really nice. And then we kind of set that precedent for our younger sister. And so I kind of wanted to have that relationship in the book as well. Just like Sue navigating through very complicated feelings, and having her sister being that like guiding light of like, hey, I've also been in high school. I know exactly what you're going through. Here, this is how, this is what helped me. And so I kind of wanted to have that special relationship into this book. And so I'm very like happy I was able to explore that, and kind of, it's like a little shout out to my sisters as well. So it was really nice.
That is so sweet, and it's so cool that you had that big sister influence. I have big sisters too. I really appreciated that aspect. And Carlos, could you tell a little bit about that sibling dynamic that was so strong in your book, and very touching, honestly, really beautiful, the way that they both made fun of each other and also supported each other.
Yeah, but they're the only ones that could make fun of you. Like Kat, my siblings were, they were my buffer. They were my protector, and my brother was probably really my first friend, and my brother especially, both lived to torment me, and also to teach me. And I think at the end of the day, as kids, we really liked each other. And even though he was the middle and I was the youngest, so the Marie, the sibling, her whole, I guess, gag or whatever, her whole um, reason is that she gets stuck being the babysitter and having to do all the sort of adult things, and she doesn't like it. She would rather go off and be a teenager and have a boyfriend and all that kind of stuff. But I was like the thorn in her side, and I in my real life, my dad would hoist my brother and I on my sister whenever some guy came by, and we suddenly had to be in the room, and that didn't happen with us. My dad was just hoping I wouldn't be gay, so he keep me alone with anyway. But I their bond was sort of the whole reason for the book, and the dialogue that they have together just wrote itself. It was so easy, and they just, it was the weirdest thing. And I wrote my book during COVID, and not to be Debbie Downer, but my mom had just passed at the first week of COVID, and so that my family was just really on in my head. And the other sad part is that most of them are gone. My sister is the only one that's still alive, and so it really was like just these voices were sort of writing themselves, coming at me, and it was COVID, and I had no other work, so it was really the perfect time to get awarded a graphic novel. Yeah, I think siblings are everything, and especially in growing up in South Dakota in a very white culture, they were, home was everything. It was
Yeah.
and whether we liked each other or not didn't matter. We were family, and at the end of the day, you don't have to like them. You have to, you love each other.
Right.
Hopefully, not every family loves each other, but
Well, you definitely showed that in your book, and it was really meaningful. And I'm sorry to hear, but you did quite an honor to them. That
yeah.
very
Thank you.
very beautifully done. Well, I have so many more questions, but we have some fabulous student questions to get to. I know these students have been waiting to ask their questions, so we're gonna move on to that. And yeah.
Can you write a graphic novel if you didn't illustrate it?
Yeah, so Rodrigo and Connie, can you
Yeah,
take
I can go ahead. Yeah, you can. Like that's what I do in our latest book with Connie. I'm the one that just writes it, and then I just give the script to Connie, and she makes the cartoons. It's very cool, and it's a great way to work because now you're not creating something on your own. You're building something together, which is so cool and so fun.
Yeah, it's really fun too because Rodrigo wrote this script, wrote a really funny script with lots of jokes, and then I get to read it and be like, "Oh, this is so fun! It's gonna be so fun to draw," and then add some funny things on my own, and it's a good teamwork, I guess.
Yeah, it's also important to be very respectful of your partners, so keep that in mind too.
Yeah, this sounds like an amazing collaboration. I can't even somehow wrap my head around it. I mean, I'm an illustrator, but that just, it's such a whole different thing working with a graphic novel. So it's so cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Um, and also, Jared, could you talk a little bit about, do you have an experience with that question or no?
Yeah, I do actually. I'm writing my first book that somebody else is drawing right now. It's a YA book, and it's called Takaro, The Last Dorok, and it'll be out I think next year from Image Comics. So it's a lot of fun to do. Just like Rodrigo and Connie mentioned, it's this cool collaborative project. You get to do something that's kind of bigger than just you. And if you do like to draw, it gives you an opportunity to write something that's maybe outside of your drawing style that somebody else could draw. And so this is a sort of like giant monster kaiju battle book, and I would never draw. I would never be able to draw that. But I'm working with my good friend Peter Santa Maria, Attack Peter, and he's an incredible artist. He does these unbelievable monsters. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And like Rodrigo mentioned, being respectful of your partner, remembering that you're partners and you're collaborating together. Also, if you do like to draw, it's a good skill to build writing scripts for other people to draw because drawing is so slow and takes so long. So if you can write something, then you could do like two books at one time. Somebody could be drawing it and you could be drawing your own book. And so you could make more stuff that way if you're a person who just likes to make stuff.
Wow, I love that answer. And wow, now my mind is reeling. So thank you. And we have another student question.
My question for an illustrator is, how did you decide how to draw the characters?
Yeah, so Kat, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, that's a really question. That's a really good question. I guess Miss Gintes was originally a autobio comic, and then I converted it into a semi-auto like comic because I wasn't comfortable. Because everyone in the comic is based on my family members, but I wasn't comfortable using their name and likeness too well without their permission. So I changed everything, and so that's why the main character looks like me with the messy hair and all that. And so yeah, I that was like my inspiration for this character. But normally I would like base questions off. Oh, sorry, base characters off of people I know. So yeah, that is my inspiration for my characters.
Oh, I love that. And Carlos, how you said it was quite an evolution starting out as Carlos was originally an older man and then a child. So could you talk a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, every time I come after Kat, she says everything I want to say. Yeah, I mean, I'm drawing my siblings and drawing, you know, uh, parents and relations. Yeah, I think with the character of Carlos, which is based on me, I had lunch one time with a good friend who's another illustrator and his friend who's an artist, and she described herself as being the little girl on the schoolyard with dark circles under her eyes, standing in the corner, and I'm like, oh my god, that's perfect, you know, and that's I originally drew Carlos to be that little girl standing in the corner with dark circles under her eyes, you know, looking in. Um, and like I said previously, you know, each of the characters is sort of based on a cartoon style that I liked. You know, the sister is definitely Archie comic books, Love and Rockets. The brother is you know a little more um, syndicated comics, King of Id, Beetle Bailey, he's all eyes. And my brother did wear big, thick glasses, but they weren't square. And he really. I tried to get the essence of them. I tried to get the physicality, and by physicality I mean like how they carried themselves, and how my brother was always sort of like, he's always the tough guy and hunched up and throwing out smart aleck comments, and I shot for that more than to make it look just like them, because it doesn't. If
Yeah.
you saw pictures of them, you'd be like, well, okay.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, I love hearing how character development is. I love that question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, Patricio, thank you. And there's a third question. This one doesn't have a video. It's from Henry C. He's a third grader from Washington. And his question is, did you like to read a lot when you were a kid? And for this one, Jared, can we start with you? I think
Sure.
we all did.
Yeah. And I talked about it a little bit. I remember I like to read, but it wasn't like the thing I love to do the most, which is, I don't know, weird maybe that now I spend all my time reading and drawing, but I like doing lots of different things. And so reading one of those things, but probably not the thing that I like to do the most. I probably liked watching cartoons and listening to music the most when I was a kid. But as I got older and I started writing, my reading started fueling my writing. And so I'm probably a maker first, though. And so, yeah.
I can definitely relate to that. And yes, can you talk a little bit about it, Rodrigo and Connie? Connie, were you a big reader?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I read that much as a kid. Like I did read, like, it's not like I didn't read at all, but I had like to read for school, and my parents would sometimes get me books, and I'd be like, oh, it's fun, but I'd rather be drawing or like making little clay Pokemon with my hands, just like Jared said. I did get more into reading as a teenager when I found out about A Series of Unfortunate Events. It was like my favorite thing. I was like all over it. And I think a lot of us had like this phase, like in their early teens, when it's like, now I have these favorite books. And yeah, I haven't read enough lately. I should get back to that because it's cool.
And Rodrigo?
As a kid, actually, like I used to have like very big ADHD problems. So trying to concentrate into like like a prose book or a history book is very hard, very hard. But then when I found comics, I found like, oh, this is way easier for me. So yeah, I will read a lot of comics and stuff like that. But then yeah, I actually, just like Jared, I'm more of a maker than a like reader. I just like to do stuff.
For sure. Yeah, and I love that you mentioned working with clay, Connie. Like also like that's such a big part of being like a little So so we are running out of time. I love talking to all of you so much. I could ask you a million more questions. But thank you to all of us for joining us today at the Latinx Kid Lit Book Festival. And thank you to the students who submitted wonderful questions. I am so glad you could be here with us today. And don't forget to subscribe to the Latinx Kid Lit Book Festival's YouTube channel. And if you are a school, classroom, librarian, or educator joining us, please enter our classroom book set giveaway. Very exciting. You can find the link to the entry form in the chat. Thank you so much. Adios.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Hi everyone, my name is Clarabelle Ortega, and I'm here to talk to you about my graphic novel with Rose Busamra called Frizzy. I think talking about hair within the Latinx community can be a really good starting off point to unpack a lot of the things that are issues within, our families, our friend groups, our communities in general. For me personally, it was always really important to have my hair straightened for special events. Having my hair curly meant that it was, messy. The curlier your hair was, then the more people would say you had bad hair. And I think that that comes from a place of anti-Blackness and sometimes self-hate. And I think talking about those things and unpacking why those are the beauty standards that we sort of uphold are really important, not just for the adults in our community, but especially for our kids. And I think them knowing that they are perfect the way that they are without having to change if they don't want to is really important to their self-esteem. So Marlene is not really based on anyone specific. She does have my cousin's name, and some of the experiences she has in the book are taken from my childhood and things that I sort of saw my two nieces, Gianna and Samantha, going through. I think Marlene is really brave. She's really funny. She stands up to adults in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do at 12 years old. But I just love her. I think she's really great, and I sort of wish I was a little bit more like her when I was younger. So Frizzy is the very first graphic novel that I've ever worked on, and I was surprised at how much I absolutely loved it. I love the process. I love writing in graphic novel form, love working with the artists. First Second has been incredible, and I really hope that I get to do it again. 3 Latinx kidlit books that I recommend everyone read are Valentina Salazar is Not a Monster Hunter by Zoraida Cordova, Pilar Ramirez and The Escape from Zaffa by Julian Randall, and Shadow Shaper by Daniel Jose Older. I really hope that any reader that picks Frizzy up gets to go on this journey of self-love and healing with Marlene, whether they're coming at it from the perspective of a kid who can sort of sympathize with her, or an adult who's sort of like looking back at their childhood or what they're doing with their own child. And I hope that they can find love for their own hair, for their own, face, their features, however they might look, because they're important and they're special and they're part of who you are and the story of, your family and your ancestors. And I really hope that they learn to embrace those things and that they laugh and cry and just really have a good time.